Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our first workshop on shared mobility that is co-sponsored by the California Department of Transportation and the Transportation Sustainability Research Center. So good to see all of you here this morning. So I want to welcome you and also provide you with a program overview. Here I've put a little picture of Einstein, and he says we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when creating them. And I thought this was a good way to start the day, because what we're going to be thinking a lot about today is the future of mobility and how we might solve congestion, air quality issues, equity and accessibility issues with new types of solutions. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background. So in 100 years, transportation hasn't really changed too much. And I actually have a little picture here of the Model T, which Henry Ford ushered in the early 1900s. And today, we see many, many forms of disruption and innovation, and many more planned for the future. They include sharing models, electric vehicles, automated vehicles, new types of business models, and I think what's really poignant for our meeting today is the role of public-private partnerships and how we can come together with new business models and new entrepreneurs to help solve California's transportation issues. So what I'd like to start with is the concept in terms of sharing is far from new. We all started to do it when we were little kids, and actually car sharing, bike sharing, ride sharing, they've all been with us for a very long time. You can see here a picture of Witcar, which launched in Amsterdam. It was a shared vehicle system. And then also you can see the White Bike system that also launched in Amsterdam. I will say that car sharing had its future and started in Switzerland, not actually in Amsterdam, in the 1940s, as did our work in ride sharing. When we came together after the war and during the war, actually during and after the war, to share cars and fill these empty seats because we were trying to conserve rubber, all sorts of resources. So ride sharing's been with us for a long time, but it has been faltering a bit. You know, at its early days or in its height, it was about 20% of the modal split. And reported in 2013, it's fallen to about 9.3 percentage points of our modal split. So I think one of the challenges and opportunities here for us today is to look at new technologies and new business models and see what we can do to perhaps fill these empty seats and fulfill the promise of reducing congestion and improving air quality. So the sharing economy, most of you have heard of, because we've been hearing a lot about it. And here are two covers. The Economist covered it in March of 2013, and Time magazine covered it in February of 2015. So this is not news to probably most of you in this room, that this has been garnering a lot of attention. And what we're going to be focusing on is one sector of the mobility sector of the sharing economy. There's also lots of confusion. What does the sharing economy mean? What's the access economy? What's the gig economy? What's collaborative consumption? What do all of these terms mean? Well, part of, I think, what we're going to talk about today is what all these terms mean. And in addition, we're going to be talking a lot about all of the forms of shared mobility that currently exist and continue to evolve almost on a monthly basis here, particularly in the state of California. As I've alluded to, we have a really fast pace going on. And I know you can't read this particular PowerPoint slide, but the reason I put it up is it shows just how much development is occurring in this particular sector of the sharing economy. So not just mobility, there's also housing, there's many other sectors, the makers movement, as well as food. So this has been just moving at such a quick pace. I'll tell you that personally, I started to notice a lot of change in the area of mobility in the sharing economy in 2010. And it really has just kept coming almost on a daily basis if you read the newspapers. And then before we launch into a great discussion about the opportunities, there are some obstacles here. And this is a slide from the National League of Cities that surveyed individuals in the United States. And there are some concerns about the sharing economy. Many of you probably read about these things. Labor issues, safety, insurance issues. So this is not all perfect and all worked out. We don't have all the answers to how to make this work yet and to do it in an equitable fashion that's fair for all players. But also, there are many potential benefits associated with that, which is, I think, why we're all here today, is to try to understand and mine what those potential benefits could be for the future of sharing. These things are described in detail for you in this white paper, which should be in your folder, so you have plenty of time to look through that. And today is all about diving into these categories and understanding. So why are we here today? Well, we have several workshop goals that we're really excited to present to you. So the first is increasing our understanding of shared mobility, which hopefully we're already on the road towards doing. And then we also want to explore the impacts and planning and operations. And that's from both a Caltrans perspective, but also a local planning perspective, as Caltrans works with its local partners. And then we also want to explore how shared mobility can enhance the department's mission and goals. And so specifically, there are several things that we think we should be having a keen eye to. And that includes the goal of accessibility. So how long is somebody's travel time or travel distance? And is that equitable? Is it accessible by a general definition? Also, we're concerned about livability in the state. And this includes quality of life measures, environmental justice, as well as localized emissions. And a couple exciting things that Caltrans has announced include that by 2020, they want to triple the bike mode. They want to double the PED and public transit mode, with the goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 15%. That is a notable goal, given that it is 2015 today, and we have less than 5 years to go to meet these targets. So what role can these shared mobility options play in helping to deliver on those goals? The California Transportation Plan 2040 states that 5% increase in carpooling adoption, so these are the incidental trips that I referred to, could lead to as much as a 3 percentage point reduction in vehicle miles traveled. Can we achieve that in this state by 2040? Or can we do even better with all of these technologies and opportunities in front of us? And then finally, the state of California has been a true leader in adopting legislation, including AB 32, which is our climate change legislation, SB 375, which looks at smart growth, and our proposed SB 350, which would reduce fuel use in cars and light-duty trucks by about 50%. So we have some laudable and very ambitious goals in this state. And the question I think here today is, what role can these technologies play in that? So finally, what I want to do is provide a program overview for you. You should have an agenda in your folder. We're going to start with a brief hello from Stephen Cliff from the department, followed by a discussion from Coco Briseño on innovation and technological change and the importance of this workshop today. And then we're going to dive into 2 panel discussions. The first on shared mobility. And so the notion of this is to really provide you with a good basis for moving forward in the workshop. Timothy Pompandreo will be leading you as the moderator from SFMTA. We have speakers from Lyft, Emily Castor, Car2Go, Walter Rosenkrantz, Karma Carpooling, Paul Steinberg, and Kansas Wah of Motivate. Then we're going to take a short break from 10:45 to 11, and then we're going to move into the second panel from 11 to noon, the future of shared mobility and its potential impacts on transportation planning and operations. This is going to be led and moderated by Amanda Eakin of NRDC. She will have with her a terrific panel, Jim Allison from the Capital Corridor, Rick Hutchinson, a car sharing expert, Joseph Kopser from Ride Scout, Sarah Hunter from Google X, that means Automated Vehicle Talk, and Sam Shelton from SACOG. Next, we're going to have lunch from noon to 1. We actually have a shuttle arranged to meet you just right outside the doors there, and I'll review that when we get closer to the noon hour. And then in the second half of the day, we're going to have 2 facilitated breakouts. We actually have you in 4 groups. We're going to be using 2 sides of this room. We're going to divide it, and then we have 2 other rooms right down the hallway. Each of you has a colorized dot on the back of your name badge, which will tell you what group you're going to actually go into. And before we go to lunch, I'll tell you what the color codes refer to. So the first breakout will focus on the impact of shared mobility and how people travel in select modes. And then the second will focus on the impact of shared mobility, specifically on Caltrans planning and operations. We'll take a brief break from 3 to 3:15, and then we're going to report back what the findings are and adjourn at 4. And then when all of this is over, we're going to put a synopsis together for you, along with the white paper, and the first half of the day is being videotaped. So that's the exciting day we have lined up for you. I hope all of you have come back refreshed from your Labor Day holiday and are ready to work with us and talk about shared mobility. You can see this acknowledgement slides. There's so many people that were involved in this. I think I had my first meeting on this particular brainchild of ours with Caltrans and Coco and her team and Katie Benoit of planning about a year ago. So this has been long in the works for you. So we're so happy to see all of you here. And we couldn't do it without all of you. So with that, we're going to kick off today. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce briefly our next speaker, Stephen Cliff, who is the Assistant Director for Sustainability for the California Department of Transportation.
And welcome everyone. This is a really good turnout. I'm very impressed to see such a large group and lots of friendly, familiar faces, and hope to meet many of the new faces here. I'm Steve Cliff. I'm Assistant Director for Sustainability at Caltrans. My name is not on the agenda. Susan actually tricked me into speaking this morning. Very clever, thank you. But I did just want to say, a quick welcome and thank you and appreciate the time. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. As you know, and I won't go into this too much because my next colleague will speak a little bit more about this, but Susan did mention that we have these new mission vision goals for the department. And at Caltrans, we're really excited to put together these various goals because it gave us a chance to define new performance metrics that would help us understand how and whether we are on track to achieve very ambitious goals. And so in some cases, these are new metrics that haven't previously been developed, like accessibility and livability. And in other cases, they're goals that are very consistent with what the state is trying to achieve, GHG emission reductions, VMT, per capita VMT reductions, and so forth. And we approach this, speaking of sharing, as a shared goal for the state. So for example, when Caltrans puts together its air quality reduction goals, those are consistent with what the Air Resources Board has set out for the state to reduce air quality emissions. When we're looking at GHG emission reduction goals, that's consistent with what AB 32 says we need to do, and so forth. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing at Caltrans isn't just in our sort of wheelhouse or our comfort area, but that we're having to reach out to other agencies, other departments to achieve these very ambitious goals. And many of those you heard mentioned just previously. So I think that for us is really exciting because we're going to have to develop new metrics, we're going to have to work with stakeholders to do that, and we're going to have to come up with an approach that maybe we as a department only have previously had a very small role in helping to achieve, say in the GHG area, but we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can so that we're supporting the broader statewide goals to see the benefits that the state has laid out for us. In accessibility in particular, this is one area where we're now working to kind of figure out exactly what that metric looks like, how it'll be used within the department, how we develop it, and then how we improve upon that. So that's a very ambitious goal. We've got roughly a year to kind of figure this all out. And, that's going to be working with stakeholders. It's probably going to be working with consultants and some research to really figure out how to do this. Maybe I'll just quickly tell a kind of a story, which I think is I haven't told, or maybe some of you have heard previously, but I haven't told in a large group before. I recently went through my own stakeholder process at home, trying to be a little more car light. And this is hard to do. We have 3 drivers in our house, and we had 3 vehicles, so everyone could drive whenever they wanted. And it didn't really make sense for all of us to have a vehicle, given that more than 95% of the time, any one of those vehicles was just sitting there getting, UV eaten and sort of rotting away in the driveway or in some parking lot somewhere. So a good friend of mine, sitting back here, had talked me into getting this folding bicycle. And I thought, if I could use this folding bicycle combined with transit for at least part of my trips, that I could, get rid of one of those vehicles. We didn't really need all of them. So I set out to buy this bicycle, which I did, and I love the bike, and use that as sort of this kind of long process, working with my own stakeholder group. This is my wife and daughter, to say, we don't really need all these vehicles. Well, I was riding home one day. I got off light rail, and I'm riding home, and I ride by this hedge, and I hear this tss, and I thought it was the sprinklers that had gone on in this, watering this hedge next to me. Well, it turned out, the kind of back of the bike starts doing this, and I realize, oh, I've got a flat tire. So I text my wife, I'm going to be a little bit late. She says, I'll come and get you. Now I got this. So I won't tell you which ride-sharing company I used, but I needed a lift to get home, and so I, hailed a ride. And within just a few minutes, I could fold up my bike, and I threw it in the back of the trunk, of this vehicle, and I was home, in relatively short order. And that was the point at which my wife and daughter realized that we actually don't need that other vehicle. That really, on demand, if I need something, it's there, and we don't have to have the ability for every one of us to have a vehicle anytime we need it, just in the event that we might. Because in fact, most of the time we didn't. So I'm happy to say we ended up selling one of those vehicles to the tune of $1,200 a year savings in insurance. That's because I have a teenage driver, and so now I don't have a teenage driver who's listed as a primary driver on a vehicle. So huge savings in insurance. Of course, I also get the benefits of not having to maintain that vehicle and what I achieved by getting rid of it. There's another family who's really happy to have that vehicle now. So I'm excited that this type of sharing economy is paired with the smartphones, really allows us to achieve our mobility goals in a way that helps us individually, sort of economically. That was a big benefit to our family. But also it means that if we don't have that other vehicle, we're not driving as much. It's really easy to drive if it's sitting there. So the fact that it's not there also means that we figure out other ways to get around, including riding and walking or carpooling and things like that. So, as a personal story, I really feel like I've benefited from this kind of sharing economy, and really excited to see how that can benefit us as a state going forward. And maybe just lastly, I'll talk about the connected and automated vehicles. Maybe I'll just collectively call those robot cars, because that's how I think of them. The idea of having everybody have one of these robot cars kind of scares me to death, because I'm really worried that that could be counter to our overall goals. But I think robot cars combined with shared mobility really could be a huge accessibility benefit, and it can also really help us achieve our GHG emission reduction goals. So I'm really looking forward to us kind of pushing forward together, so that when that technology is ripe and we have zero emission robot cars, that we can pair that with this broader sharing economy as a way to help us achieve our sustainable community goals and our GHG emission reduction goals. So thank you and welcome. I'm going to now turn it over to Coco Briseño, who I'm happy to say is the new deputy for planning and modal programs at Caltrans, and I'm really excited to have Coco in this position. Very new position for Coco, but doing a fantastic job, including getting me here today. So how great is that? Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. As Stephen said, I'm Coco Briseño, and I've been on the job as the Deputy for Planning and Modal Programs a little bit over a month, so far so good. They keep asking me to come back, so that's a good sign. So along with transportation technologies, you know, Caltrans is also on the move. Caltrans is also emerging, and Stephen and Susan talked a little bit about that. But we really want to look at how we can deliver and provide efficient transportation system. And the way that we're thinking about it is we recognize that the system is evolving in a time of change. So there's climate change that we're dealing with, meeting some of those goals that we've set for our state. There are these advances in some of the technologies, some might call them smarter vehicles, but also as well as infrastructure. Our infrastructure is getting a lot smarter as well. And then there's the growth of transportation as a service, which is kind of what this particular workshop is really focused on. So within all of that context, Caltrans cannot just sit back and not do something about it. We need to engage. We need to engage with our partners. We need to engage with stakeholders. And that's why we're very excited to have sort of the turnout and have many of you here today to help sort of figure out how we shape that. As was mentioned earlier, Caltrans recently updated our mission and our vision statement to improve and to modernize and to make sure that we're ready to sort of embrace some of these emerging strategies and these emerging challenges that are before us. So our current mission articulates exactly what kind of transportation system and leadership we as Caltrans want to deliver for the people of California. And so it reads, we provide a safe, sustainable, integrated, and efficient transportation system to enhance California's economy and livability. And we took a lot of time as an organization and working with our stakeholders to make sure that this particular mission statement really represented kind of what we want to envision as how we provide services for the people of California. Similarly, we came up with a vision statement that defines how we'll actually achieve this vision. So we want to make sure that we're a performance-driven, transparent, and accountable organization. And by doing so, we ensure that we value the people, the resources, and our partners to make sure that we meet these challenges that I've talked about a little bit earlier. And one of them is through leadership, innovation, and teamwork. So innovation continues to be something that we're looking at, and one of the things that we really are hoping to get more information out of this workshop. So based on this new mission and vision, we came up with 5 department goals, and I'll talk about those briefly. The 5 goals are, in no particular order, safety and health. And this is really something that is core to our business. It is about ensuring that we provide a safe transportation system for workers and users, and also promote health through active transportation and reduce pollution in communities. Our second goal is stewardship and efficiency. This is where we really need to pay attention that money really counts. We need to responsibly manage California's transportation-related assets. Our third goal is sustainability, livability, and economy. And this has been touched a little bit by both Susan and by Stephen. But this is where we want to make long-lasting, smart mobility decisions that improve the environment, support that vibrant economy, and build communities, not sprawl. Our fourth one is system performance. We want to utilize leadership, collaboration, and strategic partnerships to develop this integrated transportation system that really provides both reliable and accessible mobility for all travelers, not just travelers that are in a vehicle. Our fifth one is really an internal one as well as external, and it's about organizational excellence. We want to continue to be that national leader in delivering quality service through excellent employee performance, public communication, and accountability. So through these different goals that we've established for ourselves, we want to actually understand what we need to be doing as an organization. And some of the things that we are looking at, in particular related to this workshop, is we need to explore what role shared mobility could play in meeting some of the targets that have been set forth in our department goal number 3 around sustainability, livability, and economy. And we want to better understand whether shared mobility could more directly tie to many of the state energy and environmental policies, including those that have been talked about before, Assembly Bill 32 and Senate Bill 375. And also we have a series of executive orders within our government as well. So we want to look at, Stephen talked a little bit about how Caltrans really is striving to triple California's bicycle mode share, double both pedestrian and public transit mode shares, and then lower vehicle miles traveled and GHG emissions by 15% each. So there is a potential role, and we need to understand how some of the services that are being provided in this shared economy can actually contribute to helping to meet those goals. And so as part of that, Stephen also and Susan talked a little bit about the accessibility and livability scores that we're trying to develop. And the accessibility score will be determined by considering access to multimodal options in relation to housing, to jobs, etc. And the livability score considers, or is intended to consider, quality of life, environmental justice, and localized emissions. So you can see we have a huge challenge ahead of us, but working together with all of you, we know that we can get there. So we want to be looking at innovative and integrated approaches to transportation planning in particular. And technology announcements, you probably read about them on the news every day, or you hear them on the news, and you see what's happening sort of in this emerging space. And many of you probably have utilized many of these new approaches to transportation as a service, is something that I like to call it, which really begins to sort of change the mind shift or change how we look at delivering transportation, we as a Department of Transportation. So many of these technologies and innovations we recognize will have a significant impact on what Caltrans needs to do as we manage the future, as well as it will affect our core functions and how we accomplish those. So we want to have dialogue with all of you. We need to better understand the implications of these types of technologies and innovations, and we have to be able to plan for them, and plan for them in terms of long-term changes. The way that transportation is delivered will be and is significantly being impacted with all of these emerging and innovative technologies and strategies. So we need to begin to consider more actively how we factor those in to our traditional decision-making processes, or if we need to alter those traditional decision-making processes as well. So we want to work to smoothly integrate these into not just sort of how we do things from a planning perspective, but also look at how we manage the system. We want to optimize system performance statewide, and we need to understand the implications of some of these advances. So today's interactive workshop, and I'll stress the fact that it's interactive, so it's great to see so many of you here today to really help shape and inform how we can move together collaboratively in this space, is really intended to sort of gain a better understanding and to be better prepared to respond to these emerging and innovative technologies, services, and strategies. So we'll look at shared mobility as one viable alternative to owning a vehicle. Stephen talked about his great experience, and I'm sure many of you have experiences as well. And also, we'd really like to make sure that we're thinking sort of outside of the way that we traditionally look at kind of our core business practices. So research has shown for many young people that car ownership is no longer an aspiration or a universal goal. And speaking, having a teenage son who does not want to drive, I totally understand where they're coming from. And so the concept of shared mobility, the idea of sharing that vehicle, sharing that bicycle, or sharing any kind of mode is really sort of forward thinking and innovative, and it's a huge strategy that will enable us to better access the types of services that we need on a more of an as-needed basis. So Susan talked a lot about what shared mobility is, so I won't go into a lot of detail about that, especially because you're going to be talking about it for all of today. I think what I would just like to sort of conclude my remarks is that we're really excited to be a part of this. We have been working on it for a while to try to have a dialogue. We did not want to just have a dialogue with just Caltrans, ourselves speaking to each other. We wanted to really involve others and have a better understanding and sort of broaden our thinking on this particular topic. And what we're really hoping is that we'll really gain a greater understanding of how we can actually change or factor in to transportation planning some of the implications of these emerging technologies and emerging strategies. So you heard a little bit about the goals of the workshop. From a Caltrans perspective, we share those goals. We want to increase the understanding of the diverse nature of these sort of emerging shared mobility options. We want to explore the impact of shared mobility on Caltrans, transportation planning and operations, as well as partnerships with local government and local agencies. And then lastly, we really want to explore how shared mobility can enhance Caltrans' mission and vision that I talked about earlier. So as for the future, you've heard that same saying, no one knows what it actually holds, but I think we actually do, and we're seeing it here today, and that's the benefit of having a workshop like this. We know that things are going to continue to change. We know that things are going to continue to evolve. And I think what we really want to be a part of is embracing that change, working with all of you, and being better prepared to sort of take advantage of some of those opportunities that this sort of shared mobility space brings. So thank you so much for attending today's workshop, especially for those of you that traveled to come here. I know you have busy schedules and busy other things going on, but this is a very, very important topic, and we want to make sure that we have a great workshop. And I look forward to seeing the results and having further conversations with all of you on this very important and emerging sort of topic. Thank you very much.